The story of Dipset begins in the heart of Harlem, New York, a place famous for its vibrant culture, rich history, and undeniable influence on hip-hop. Before there was Dipset, there was Cameron Giles, a sharp kid from East Harlem who grew up surrounded by basketball courts and the gritty realities of the streets. Known to his friends as Cam'ron, he started his journey on the basketball court, and at one point his hoop dreams looked like they could take him places. But when those dreams were cut short by an injury, Cam had to switch his focus. Luckily, there was another passion he had been building on the side: music. Cam'ron wasn't a stranger to hip-hop. Harlem was buzzing with rap battles on the corners, local DJs spinning at block parties, and legendary names like Big L already making a name for themselves. It was a proving ground for anyone wanting to make it in rap, and Cam'ron knew he had something special. His journey into music wasn't instant success, though. He had to hustle hard and work his way up from the bottom. It was his connection with a fellow Harlem legend, Big L, that gave Cam'ron his first real chance in the music industry. Big L had been part of the famed DITC, crew digging in the crates, and was already known for his sharp lyricism. He introduced Cam'ron to people in the industry, giving him the push he needed to start recording his own material. Soon after, Cam caught the attention of Lance Rivera, a music executive connected with Notorious B.I.G. Through this connection, Cam signed his first record deal. In 1998, Cam'ron dropped his debut album, Confessions of Fire, under Entertainment and Epic Records. The album introduced the world to Cam's distinct voice and his ability to tell stories of life in Harlem with raw authenticity. Tracks like Horse Carriage featured fellow Harlem rapper My Dollar E, and while the album had moderate success, it wasn't enough to make Cam'ron a household name just yet. Still, the foundation was being laid for something bigger. Cam'ron wasn't just thinking about himself, he had a vision for a crew, a movement that would represent Harlem in a way that hadn't been done before. This is where Dipset truly begins. Cam'ron needed people he could trust to help him build this vision, and he didn't have to look far. His childhood friend, Joseph Guillermo Jones, I known to most as Jim Jones, had been by his side for years. Jim was more than just a hype man or background figure. He was Cam's right hand, someone who could help him navigate the streets and the industry. Together, they started laying the groundwork for what would soon become the Diplomats. Around the same time, Cam'ron also connected with a younger talent from Harlem, Leron James, who would eventually become known as Juelz Santana. Juelz, who was just a teenager at the time, had raw talent and potential. He brought a fresh, energetic vibe to the group, complementing Cam'ron's street-hardened flows with his youthful charisma. With Jim Jones and Juelz Santana on board, the core of Dipset was starting to take shape. But Dipset was more than just a rap group, it was a reflection of Harlem itself. The crew's swagger, their unapologetic confidence, and their love for flashy, colorful fashion made them stand out. They wore oversized jackets, gaudy jewelry, and bandanas, turning street style into high fashion long before it became a mainstream trend. Dipset wasn't just about the music, they were a movement representing Harlem's hustle, pride, and resilience. As Cam'ron's career continued to grow, Dipset was becoming a force to be reckoned with. Cam's next big break came when he was introduced to Damon Dash, co-founder of Rockefeller Records. Dash was impressed with Cam's raw talent and business mind, and soon enough Cam'ron inked a deal with Rockefeller. This move would prove to be a game-changer for both Cam'ron and Dipset. It was here, under the Rockefeller banner, that Dipset would go from a local Harlem crew to a nationwide phenomenon. Cam'ron's first project with Rockefeller, Come Home With Me, dropped in 2002 and was an instant success. The album featured two massive hits, Oh Boy and Hey Massachusetts, both of which dominated the charts and became anthems of the early 2000s. These songs were more than just radio hits, they were a celebration of Harlem and the Dipset lifestyle. The success of Come Home With Maine didn't just elevate Cam'ron, it brought Dipset into the spotlight as a legitimate force in hip-hop. With Cam'ron leading the charge, Jim Jones as the street general, and Juelz Santana as the rising star, Dipset was primed to take over the hip-hop world. Harlem had always been a significant part of hip-hop history, but Dipset was about to put their own stamp on the culture in a way that no one had seen before. As Cam'ron gained momentum in the industry, he quickly realized that Harlem wasn't just a location, it was an identity, and that identity needed a crew to represent it. Enter the Diplomats, better known as Dipset. Harlem had always been known for its flashy, bold style, and Dipset was no different. Cameron, with his unmistakable swagger and larger-than-life persona, knew he couldn't carry this movement alone. That's when he brought in some of his closest friends and fellow Harlem natives, Jim Jones and Juelz Santana. Jim Jones had been Cameron's childhood friend, and although he wasn't rapping at first, his street smarts and business acumen made him an essential part of the crew. Jones eventually became one of the group's core members, taking on the role of both hype man and later solo artist. Meanwhile, Juelz Santana, the youngest member of the crew, brought a fresh energy. With his distinct voice and lyrical talent, Santana was ready to prove that he could hang with the best even as a teenager. As Cameron's success grew, particularly after the release of his second album, SDE, Sports, Drugs, Entertainment, it became clear that Dipset was more than just a group of friends making music. Cameron's next move was critical signing with Rockefeller Records under the guidance of Damon Dash. The label already had its hands on some of the biggest names in hip-hop, including Jay-Z, and Cameron's addition to the roster brought even more fire to the label. In 2002, Cameron dropped Come Home With Me, an album that would not only change his life but also put Dipset on the map in a massive way. The single Old Boy featuring Juelz Santana became an instant hit, skyrocketing to the top of the charts. This track wasn't just another club banger, it was the sound of Harlem invading the mainstream. The colorful, boastful, and unapologetic swagger that Dipset embodied was in full force, and suddenly everyone wanted to be a part of it. What set Dipset apart was their brand. Their image was just as important as their music. Cameron, famously rocking pink fur coats and driving pink Range Rovers, became a style icon. Dipset's fashion was loud, bold, and in your face, much like their music. Their signature look, oversized jerseys, bandanas, and leather jackets became a staple of early 2000s hip-hop culture. Beyond the aesthetics, though, Dipset's sound was also something unique. Their beats were a blend of classic soul samples with hard-hitting, gritty production. This combination, led by producers like Just Blaze and Heat Makers, created a sonic landscape that perfectly complemented Dipset's lyrical content, street tales mixed with braggadocio and Harlem pride. With the crew firmly established, Dipset quickly became more than just a musical group. They were a movement, a cultural phenomenon that represented Harlem streets. Cameron's vision for Dipset wasn't just about dominating the rap charts, it was about creating a lasting legacy for Harlem. By 2003, Dipset was a force to be reckoned with. After Cameron's massive success with Come Home With Me and the hit singles Oh Boy and Hey Massachusetts, the crew was ready to capitalize on their momentum. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived when the Diplomats released their debut group album, Diplomatic Immunity. It was a double album, a bold move, but that was exactly Dipset's style: big, loud, and unapologetic. Diplomatic Immunity was more than just an album. It was a declaration of Dipset's arrival as hip-hop's next supergroup. Right from the jump, it set the tone with heavy-hitting production and raw, unfiltered lyrics. The album was a fusion of Harlem's grit and Dipset's distinctive flair, packed with street anthems and larger-than-life boasts. Songs like Dipset Anthem featuring Juelz Santana became instant classics, with its aggressive beat and infectious hook. Juelz was stepping up as a star in his own right, and his verses on Diplomatic Immunity showed that he was more than just a sidekick to Cameron. The album wasn't just about individual talent, though. It was a showcase of the group's chemistry. Whether it was Cameron's charismatic wordplay, Juelz's youthful hunger, or Jim Jones' rugged style, Diplomatic Immunity proved that Dipset was more than the sum of its parts. They had crafted their own language, slang, and style that resonated with listeners from the streets of Harlem to the suburbs across America. Their impact went beyond just music. They were trendsetters, influencing fashion, lifestyle, and even the way people talked. The production on Diplomatic Immunity was another key factor that set the album apart. The Heat Makers, the production duo responsible for much of Dipset's signature sound, leaned heavily into sampling soulful melodies and flipping them into hard-hitting beats. Tracks like I Really Mean It exemplified this, with its triumphant horns and punchy drums creating an anthem that demanded attention. This approach to production became one of Dipset's trademarks, combining nostalgia with raw energy. As Diplomatic Immunity climbed the charts, Dipset solidified their place in the upper echelon of the hip-hop world. Their success wasn't just limited to New York. Across the country, fans were drawn to their swagger, their confidence, and their ability to blend humor with hardcore lyricism. They weren't afraid to be flamboyant, whether it was through Cameron's infamous pink fur coat or their brash, no-holds-barred attitude. Dipset represented a new breed of hip-hop, one that was all about standing out and making a statement. While Cam'ron had already proven himself as a solo artist, Diplomatic Immunity gave Juelz Santana and Jim Jones their time to shine. Juelz's solo career was taking off, and his verses on Diplomatic Immunity helped solidify him as one of the hottest young talents in the game. His debut album, From Maine to You, followed shortly after, showcasing his lyrical prowess and solidifying his status as a star in his own right. Meanwhile, Jim Jones was beginning to come into his own as a solo artist, though it would take a few more years before he would fully step into the spotlight. Diplomatic Immunity wasn't just a commercial success, it was a cultural moment. Dipset's influence extended far beyond music as their style, slang, and bravado began to shape hip-hop culture. Fans were adopting their larger-than-life fashion choices, from oversized clothing to flashy accessories, while their slang became a staple in hip-hop vernacular. Phrases like "no homo" and "you mad" became part of the cultural lexicon, though not without controversy. As Dipset's popularity grew, so did their influence in the industry. They were no longer just artists, they were tastemakers. The Diplomats had successfully carved out their own lane, one that was uniquely Harlem and uniquely Dipset. Their unapologetic approach to both music and life resonated with a generation of fans who admired their hustle and confidence. However, with all this success came challenges, both from within and outside the group. Internal dynamics were shifting, and while Dipset was riding high, cracks were beginning to form. But at this moment, during the height of Diplomatic Immunity, they were untouchable. Their bold, aggressive, and brash style set them apart from their peers and cemented their place in the history of hip-hop. At the height of Dipset's success, they seemed unstoppable. But with fame and power came tension, both within the crew and with the broader hip-hop industry. One of the most significant external conflicts during this time was the feud between Cam'ron and Nas. What started as a disagreement over lyrical content escalated into a public beef that shook the New York rap scene. In 2002, during an infamous Power 105 radio interview, Nas called out Cam'ron, dissing his album Come Home with Maine and questioning his lyrical abilities. Cam'ron, never one to shy away from confrontation, quickly fired back. He released a scathing diss track, Show You How, where he took aim at Nas, mocking both his music and personal life. The beef gained momentum and captivated fans who were witnessing two of the biggest names in New York hip-hop trading blows. While this beef with Nas stirred up attention, it was Cam'ron's ongoing tensions with Rockefeller Records that would have more lasting consequences. Although Cam had found success under the Rockefeller banner, the dynamics within the label were shifting. Rockefeller was essentially split between two camps, Jay-Z and Damon Dash. Cam'ron, being closely aligned with Dash, found himself at odds with Jay-Z, who was increasingly becoming the face of the label. The tension boiled over when Jay-Z was named president of Def Jam, which Rockefeller was a part of, in 2004. Many within the label, including Cam'ron and Dash, felt betrayed by Jay-Z's move into corporate leadership, seeing it as a power grab. Cam'ron, never one to hold back, took his grievances public. In a series of interviews, he openly criticized Jay-Z, claiming that Jay wasn't supporting the growth of Dipset and that his leadership was stifling the movement. This created a divide not only within Rockefeller but also in the streets, where fans took sides in what was seen as a power struggle between two of New York's most influential figures. The conflict reached a tipping point when Cam'ron released the track You Gotta Love It, a direct diss at Jay-Z, which featured lyrics mocking Jay's age and his corporate ambitions. The diss track went viral in the hip-hop community, and fans eagerly awaited a response from Jay-Z. Although Jay-Z did eventually respond with Dig a Hole, the feud seemed to be more about egos than anything else. But the damage was done, and the fallout led to further divisions within Rockefeller, eventually contributing to the label's dissolution. Amidst these external conflicts, internal issues were also bubbling up within Dipset. As the crew grew in popularity, so did the individual ambitions of its members. Cam'ron remained the face of the movement, but Jim Jones and Juelz Santana were beginning to carve out their own lanes. Jim, in particular, was stepping into the spotlight, not only as a rapper but as a businessman and leader in his own right. His debut album, On My Way to Church, was released in 2004 and solidified him as more than just Cam's right-hand man. By 2006, Jim Jones had a massive hit with We Fly High, a track that became an anthem and introduced his bowling catchphrase to the world. While Jim Jones was thriving, Juelz Santana was also coming into his own as a solo artist. His sophomore album, What the Game's Been Missing, featured the hit single There Go the Whistle song and proved that he could stand tall as a star in his own right. However, as both Jim and Juelz began to gain individual success, the dynamics within Dipset shifted. The group that once moved as a tight-knit unit was now starting to experience growing pains. Adding to the pressure was the fact that each member had their own vision for Dipset's future. Cam'ron, ever the entrepreneur, was branching out into film and other ventures, while Jim and Juelz were focused on expanding their musical careers. These differing ambitions led to tension, and eventually the crew began to drift apart. By the late 2000s, it was clear that the Dipset movement wasn't as unified as it once had been. Still, despite the internal and external conflicts, Dipset continued to make waves in hip-hop. Their influence was undeniable, and even as they faced challenges, their music style and swagger continued to resonate with fans across the world. But as the decade came to a close, it was clear that the golden era of Dipset was beginning to fade. The group's internal struggles, combined with the changing landscape of the music industry, made it difficult for them to maintain the same dominance they once had. Dipset's legacy, however, was far from over. Even as the group faced turmoil, they had already left an indelible mark on hip-hop culture, and their story was far from finished. As Dipset's dominance started to fade in the late 2000s, it became increasingly clear that the internal dynamics within the group were changing. What had once been a unified front representing Harlem pride, street culture, and unfiltered swagger was slowly unraveling. Personal differences, creative ambitions, and industry pressures all contributed to the gradual disintegration of the movement. By 2007, the cracks that had been forming within the group for years finally reached a breaking point. The tension between Cam'ron and Jim Jones was at the heart of the group's unraveling. Cam'ron, who had always been the leader and mastermind behind Dipset's rise, was now facing increasing pushback from Jim, who was coming into his own as an artist and a businessman. The success of Jim's hit single We Fly High had solidified him as a force in the industry, and with that success came a desire for more control over his career and, by extension, Dipset's direction. In 2007, the tension between Cam'ron and Jim boiled over in public. Jim Jones, who had once been Cam's closest ally, openly criticized Cam'ron in interviews, accusing him of abandoning the group and not being there for his team. Jim claimed that Cam'ron had gone into hiding following a shooting incident in Washington, D.C., where Cam had been injured. According to Jim, Cam'ron had distanced himself from Dipset during this period, leaving the rest of the crew to fend for themselves. Cam'ron, in turn, defended himself, claiming that he had taken a step back from the spotlight to focus on personal matters, including caring for his mother, who had fallen ill. He insisted that he had not abandoned the group, but the damage was done. The public feud between Cam and Jim was splashed across headlines, and fans were left wondering if Dipset would ever be the same. At the same time, Juelz Santana was also experiencing his own struggles. Despite his early success and the promise of even bigger things to come, Juelz's career had hit a rough patch. Legal issues, label conflicts, and personal problems had slowed down the momentum he had built with hits like There Go the Whistle song and his work on diplomatic immunity. By the late 2000s, Juelz was in a battle to regain control of his career, and his focus shifted away from Dipset as he tried to resolve his own issues. The internal strife, combined with the rapidly changing landscape of hip-hop, made it difficult for Dipset to maintain the same relevance they once had. The rise of Southern rap, led by artists like Lil Wayne, T.I., and Jeezy, shifted the focus of the hip-hop industry away from New York, and Dipset found themselves struggling to adapt to the new sound. While Cam'ron, Jim, and Juelz had always thrived on gritty, street-centric anthems, the industry was moving toward more melodic, club-friendly music. Cam'ron attempted to keep pace with the changing times, releasing Crime Pays in 2009, but the album failed to capture the same magic as his earlier work. Though it debuted at No. 3 on the Billboard 200, it was clear that the momentum behind Cam'ron and Dipset had significantly waned. Meanwhile, Jim Jones continued to find moderate success with his solo projects, but without the full force of Dipset behind him, his impact was limited. By the end of the 2000s, Dipset was essentially dormant. The crew that had once defined Harlem's identity and dominated the hip-hop scene was now fractured, with each member pursuing their own path. Cam'ron, Jim Jones, and Juelz Santana were no longer moving as a unit, and fans who had followed their rise were left disappointed by the apparent dissolution of one of hip-hop's most iconic movements. Though Dipset never officially announced a breakup, it was clear to everyone that the movement had come to an end. The internal conflicts, public feuds, and changing dynamics within the music industry had taken their toll, and the group's golden era was over. Despite the disappointment surrounding their disbandment, each member of Dipset continued to leave their mark on the industry in their own way. Cameron, always the hustler, shifted his focus to business ventures and independent projects, while Jim Jones continued to explore his potential as both an artist and an executive. Juelz Santana, although facing legal challenges and personal struggles, remained a fan favorite, with many hoping for a comeback. Dipset's downfall may have marked the end of an era, but their influence was far from over. The legacy they left behind, one of Harlem pride, street fashion, and unapologetic swagger, continued to resonate throughout the hip-hop world. And while their time at the top had come to a close, their story was far from finished. Although Dipset's golden era seemed to have ended in the late 2000s, their story wasn't finished yet. By the early 2010s, rumblings of a potential reunion began to surface. For years, fans had been clamoring for the crew to come back together, and after a period of solo ventures and internal conflict, it finally seemed possible. In 2010, to the surprise of many, Cameron, Jim Jones, Juelz Santana, and Freekey Zekey reunited, officially putting their past differences behind them to bring Dipset back. The reunion was more than just a personal reconciliation, it was a cultural moment. In an era where many hip-hop groups disbanded and never returned, Dipset's decision to reunite felt like a return to the essence of early 2000s hip-hop. Their first reunion show at the Best Buy Theater in New York City was a reminder of the influence they had wielded over the streets, with diehard fans filling the venue to celebrate their return. The nostalgia was palpable, but Dipset wasn't content with just reliving the past. They were determined to push their legacy forward. Following their reunion, Dipset hit the studio to record new material, releasing singles like Salute that embraced their signature sound while adapting to a new era of hip-hop. However, the road back to the top wasn't without challenges. The music landscape had changed significantly since their heyday, with the rise of Southern rap, trap, and new digital platforms like streaming services altering how hip-hop was consumed. For Dipset, who had once ruled the mixtape circuit and relied on physical album sales, it was a new game, but they were determined to adapt. One of the key reasons Dipset's reunion resonated so strongly was their lasting influence on the culture. Their impact on fashion, slang, and music had not only survived but continued to thrive in their absence. Younger artists, particularly from New York, paid homage to Dipset, acknowledging their role in shaping the city's hip-hop identity. $AP Rocky, who rose to prominence in the 2010s, cited Dipset as a major influence on his style, particularly their bold fashion choices and Harlem swagger. Other artists like Dave East and Fabulous also expressed admiration for the crew, reinforcing Dipset's place in hip-hop history as pioneers who bridged the gap between street rap and mainstream success. Though their post-reunion music didn't achieve the same chart-topping success as their earlier albums, Dipset's return to the scene wasn't just about sales. It was about legacy, cementing their place in the culture and reminding the world of what they had accomplished. The fact that they were able to put aside personal differences and reunite for their fans was a testament to the strength of their bond and the loyalty they felt to the movement they had built. In 2018, Dipset released Diplomatic Ties, their first full-length project as a group since Diplomatic Immunity 2 in 2004. The album was a reminder that while the times had changed, Dipset's chemistry and influence were as potent as ever. Though it wasn't a commercial blockbuster, Diplomatic Ties was embraced by their loyal fan base and served as a victory lap for the crew that had once dominated the streets of Harlem and beyond. The lasting legacy of Dipset extends far beyond music. They redefined what it meant to be a hip-hop collective, with each member carving out their own space in the industry while still maintaining their loyalty to the group. Their influence on fashion, particularly Cameron's iconic pink era, left an indelible mark on hip-hop style, with artists and fans alike adopting their bold, unapologetic looks. Dipset's slang, energy, and attitude permeated the culture, and even today their contributions are felt in everything from streetwear to rap lyrics. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of Dipset's legacy is the way they represented Harlem. For many fans, Dipset wasn't just a rap crew, they were ambassadors of Harlem's culture, pride, and hustle. Their music was a celebration of the streets, but it was also a reflection of their community's resilience and determination. Whether they were rapping about their struggles or their success, Dipset always stayed true to their roots, making them heroes in their neighborhood and icons in hip-hop. Beyond their influence on music and fashion, Dipset's reunion symbolized something larger: the enduring power of loyalty, brotherhood, and resilience. In a genre often marked by rivalries and fallouts, Dipset's ability to come back together showed that despite the challenges they faced, their bond was unbreakable. It was this sense of unity that made their story so powerful, even after all the ups and downs. As Dipset's members continue to pursue their individual projects, their collective legacy remains intact. They helped shape the sound and style of a generation, and their influence continues to ripple through the culture today. Whether it's a younger artist paying tribute to their music or a fan wearing a Dipset logo on a t-shirt, the movement they started remains alive and well. In the end, Dipset's story is one of resilience, creativity, and lasting impact. They may have faced their fair share of challenges, but their contribution to hip-hop is undeniable. From the streets of Harlem to the global stage, Dipset's legacy will forever be intertwined with the history of hip-hop, a testament to the power of a movement that started with a group of friends and grew into a cultural phenomenon.